All right, so here in part 3 of the video, we're going to talk about the government-wide statement of activities, essentially your income statement, right? So we're going to use several steps here to prepare the government-wide statement of activities. We're going to review facts that are provided. We're going to have to identify which are governmental and which are business type activities. Remember, again, we're breaking these out into governmental and business type activities in a very similar fashion to what we did in the statement of net position. Next, we're going to identify any program-related revenues. Those include, if you'll recall, go back and review if you can't recall this pretty quickly. But any program-related revenues include charges for services and operating grants, right? And just remember the big note that I gave you guys earlier. All tax revenue sources are considered general revenues. They are not program revenues. Even if you would typically consider them to be part of a program revenue, for financial statement purposes, they are not. They are general revenues. Okay, and then step 3, we're going to calculate the net expense or net revenue and change in net position. We're going to take this program-specific revenues minus the expenses. We do it for both governmental and business type activities. The formula for step 3 is right here. Write it down. Pause the video, write this down, just get familiar with it, okay? So program revenues, which is your charges for services plus your operating grants, minus any program expenses equals your net expense or revenue and change in net position. Be aware, this is typically a negative number. What that means is that your expenses exceeded your revenues. This is not unusual for a program, right? This is not unusual in governmental accounting. So step 4, now we're going to identify all general revenue items, okay? So in this problem, that's going to be all the taxes, any investment earnings, any special items like gain on sale of land, gain on sale of an asset, things like that, and any transfers that you're getting from other governmental funds or other governments, whatever the case may be, okay? Just recall that your taxes, that's the big one. Your taxes, any tax is going to be considered a general revenue. And then finally, number 5, we're going to calculate the total general revenues and combine that with the total primary government, and we're going to find a change in net position. And we're going to add that change in net position to the beginning net position to find the ending net position. That is something we've been doing for years as accountants. You know, your beginning plus your any change is going to be your ending, right? So you're going to do this for both governmental and business type activities and then a combined total for both of those. It seems like a lot right now, but hopefully as we walk through this example, you will start to see it's really not as scary as it sounds. We've been doing all of them. We've been doing all these things for years now. So hopefully you guys could do most of this in your sleep by this point. So let's take a look at the fact pattern here. We're going to use the facts that are given to us to prepare a statement of activities for Northern Pines for the year ended June 30th, 2017. Okay, so here we can see a list of expenses. We're going to see general public or general government, public safety, public works, health and sanitation, so on and so forth. And then we're going to see our revenues, charges for services, for general government, charges for services, public safety, operating grant for public safety. Now, we know that charges for services and operating grant, those are program revenues, right? So keep that in mind while you're going through this. And then later on down the line, we got property taxes, sales taxes. We know that those are going to be general revenues. And then we were told in the facts that any investments, any special items, any transfers, those were also going to be included in general revenues. So I would go through, just make sure you can identify which of these they are. And we're going to do that as we move forward. So we're going to start with expenses here. Step 1, review the facts provided and identify which are governmental and which are business type activities. Well, they don't exactly tell us here. They don't split these out for us on the expense side like they did the revenue side, right? So the general rule is we can look at these and we can say, okay, general government, definitely governmental type expense, right? Public, anything to do with the public is probably going to be a general government expense. Health and sanitation, culture and recreation, any interest, anything like that. All of those are governmental type activities, right? Those are things the government is providing to, you're providing them to the citizenry with no real expectation of any kind of return or benefit, right? However, the next ones are going to be business type activities, your water and sewer systems. So just remember that utilities very typically are always going to be considered business type activities. Parking system, that may be something where you have a special downtown district and the government has parking lots set up downtown where you pay $5 to park for 3 or 4 hours or whatever the case may be, right? So those are going to be business type activities. So as you're going through your expenses, just think about who is this benefiting, right? So general government, obviously benefiting everybody. Public safety, that's benefiting everybody. Public works, benefiting everybody. Health and sanitation, that's going to typically be like your trash delivery systems, things like that. If your government has a sanitation department, right? Culture and recreation, most parks and recs departments, they're for everybody, right? Also, fun note, parks and recs department, generally lots of fraud going on there because there's lots of cash involved. And any interest on long-term debt, governmental type, they tell us right there, it's governmental, right? So easy enough. Okay, so just get familiar with using that process. Who is this benefiting? Is it benefiting the public at large? Okay, it's a government. It's probably going to be a governmental type activity. So here they have been kind enough to tell us, which ones are government, which ones aren't, right? And then they've also given us a list of which ones are charges for services, which ones are charges for or operating grants, so we can break those down. We're going to break these down into business type or governmental, and then we will further break those down into program related or general revenue. So these top ones are all program related. They're charges for services, they're operating grants, right? So those are all going to be program revenues. Everything down here on the bottom, sales taxes, investments and earnings, special items, transfers, those are all going to be general revenue. And then net position obviously is just net position. They're giving us the beginning net position here for both governmental and business type activities. So let's move on and kind of start working through this statement of activities. Now, I think the statement of activities is really kind of the most confusing looking one, right? There's a lot of information here. Instead of starting with the revenues on the left and then subtracting the expenses on the right, we're actually going to start with the expenses on the left. And then we're going to have charges for services and operating grants, and then governmental and business activities. It all just seems a little bit overwhelming and confusing at first. But if you simply remember that formula that we gave you in step 3, it's right here at the top again. Program revenues minus program expenses equals your net expense or revenue. Typically, it's going to be negative. We expect that to be a negative number, right? So don't freak out when you see that it's a negative number. Okay, so let's start general government. We had $11,760,000 in expenses. We had charges for services in the amount of $1,310,000. We're not going to have any business type activities here. Why? Well, because these are all governmental type activities, right? We've labeled those out. This is why it's helpful to go through and just label those, because now we know none of these we're not going to have any business type activity values in that column there. Okay, so same thing with the business type activities. If you went ahead and labeled those out, you'll know that when you get down to your business type activities like the water and sewer system, the parking system, you're not going to have any governmental type activities there on your net expense and revenue change in that position. Okay. And then you can fill in your total business type activities and your total primary type activities. Okay, so let's get started and go through that. All right, so revenues and expenses, it's switched, but just know that your revenues minus your expenses, right? So we're expecting those to be negative. Don't get too confused when you see this flipped around. So let's start by listing everything out in our governmental activities. General government, we had already filled that out. Public safety, going to show you right there that we have our governmental matches our total because there was no business type activity, and you just go through and you would continue to do that for all of your facts that you were given, right? So we can see that we have total governmental activities of a negative $49,998,000. So you've got net expense in your governmental type activities. That's fine. That's what we expect, right? It costs money to run these programs, and these programs really don't generate. You can see here, if you look at your charges for services and even including some of the operating grants that you got, they don't generate any money really, right? We're just running them for the benefit of the public. Okay. All right, so now let's take a look at the business type activities. So again, remember, we've got these big X's here. So we know that we're not going to have any governmental activities for the business type, and we're not going to have any business type for the governmental activities. So those X's are there for a reason. So business type activities, water and sewer system, parking system. And then we had our total business type activities, and we can see that we had a net revenue of $857,000. Okay, so we actually made a little bit of money on our business type activities, but in the end, when we total those together to get a net, we get negative $49,141,000, which again, we expect that to be negative. It's not unusual. It's not anything to freak out about. Again, we're not measuring the success of these government programs based on how much money they're bringing in, but we're measuring the success on other non-financial metrics, right? Did the program actually fulfill its objective, right? So now, step 4, we're going to identify the general revenue items. Those were all those taxes, the investments, the special items, any transfers that we had. So one thing that we do need to make sure that we note, though, is that was it a business type or was it a governmental type? We're always going to want to know that. Just take note that taxes, typically any tax revenue that you generate is going to be governmental. Okay, very rarely are they going to be a business type revenue. So here we know we don't have any program revenues, so we don't have to worry about that side of our statement, right? There are no program revenues. These are just general revenues. Okay, so property taxes, $27,112,000. Sales taxes, $20,698,000. Again, notice there weren't any business type activities associated with these taxes because taxes, like I said, are generally always going to be governmental type activities. Investment earnings, $325,000. It said they were associated with business activities. Special item, gain on sale of land, told us it was a governmental type activity. And then we got transfers, which, special note here, just like with financial accounting, when you have to eliminate any intercompany transfers, right? Like between a parent and a subsidiary. Same thing here. Any transfers that come from one governmental entity to another governmental entity within the same government, we're going to eliminate those transfers. So you can see here we had an inflow for our governmental activities of $700,000 and then an outflow for business type activities of $700,000. It's going to be a net zero for us. So we're going to look at our totals here. Total general revenue items, we had $49,385,000 for our net revenue and change in net position here. Very good for us. So change in net position, just a quick note, we're going to take all of those red numbers, the total government plus business, and then we're going to items, then we're going to add the blue numbers, the total general revenue items. That's going to equal our change in net position. Then we add the beginning net position to that, and that is going to be our ending net position. So here is what that in the entirety of that statement's going to look like. Again, it's big, it's scary looking, but don't be intimidated by it. You guys have this completely under control as long as you take this step by step. Use those 5 steps. Really focus on being able to identify when something is a governmental or business type, when something is a program revenue, or when it's a general revenue, and you're going to be fine. All you're doing is just filling in the blanks once you get to that point. So any questions about this, please feel free to contact me. I'm always happy to work with you guys and answer any questions that you might have. Believe it or not, I learn a lot as well when you guys ask me questions. I may have to focus on something I don't typically focus on. So, I love getting questions from you guys. So please ask me any questions you have. I'm happy to answer them. That's chapter 8. We only have one more chapter left in this class. That's chapter 10. We're going to talk about NFPs finally, not-for-profits. So some of you that work for NFPs are going to be excited about that. And I'm glad to start talking about them. Really, the thing with those is they're pretty much the same. We just got some different restriction types. Okay, so I will see you guys when we get back to chapter 10.